Alright, so this next tutorial is on creating that column. This is a kind of 3D column family in Revit, and this is what it's going to look like. This is kind of the end result here. So this is what it'll look like when you finish with it. And essentially what it is it's got a couple parameters in here, so let's open 4 blue squares. So I can control the width of the joint, the depth of these little joints, and these are the little joints here, there and there. Yep. Alright. And then we've got the base and capital. I got a height parameter on those guys. So if I change that to 8, that to 14 inches, let's say. Alright, and apply, and it squeezes those. Notice when you increase the capital, the height of the capital and the height of the base, that these joints here all stay equally spaced. So those kind of change size as well. And you can change the width and depth of those joints, and then of course the diameter. And I'm going to change the diameter to say 2 feet. And so it changes the diameter of that column to 2 feet. So that's basically what it is. And essentially what we're doing is, let me pick this guy here, and what it is it's a revolve. And so this is so what you're doing is you're creating a profile, and then you're rotating it around this axis point, and that's what's creating it. Now the trick to this though is putting in all of the reference planes and parameters and setting them all up ahead of time. This is kind of the end result here, with all the parameters and all that kind of stuff in there. Alright, so let me just hit cancel, and then I'll close this, and let's start a new one. I'm going to say close. Alright, going back to the handout, so what it says is to use the column.rft template, and we're going to create a type called 18 inches by the when we're finished. Alright, and then this will give us, let's see, this gives us our dimensions that we're going to use. Alright, so let's go to here. Alright, I'm going to go to a new family, and I'm going to go to column. Alright, so I'm going to select column.rft and say open. Alright, there it is. Alright, so this is what we've got so far. We just basically have a series of reference planes that I've got a width and a depth, and pretty much neither one of these I need. So you kind of delete them, or whatever you want to do with them. Alright. Okay. And then I go to my reference plane, so I got a width and a depth parameters. Let's see if I can just delete these. Can I delete that one? Yep. Okay, so I can just delete both of those, because what we need is we're going to need a diameter, a base, a width, capital, all those other things here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is create first my diameter reference plane. I'm sorry, my diameter parameter. All right, and what I want to do is I'm going to go across here. So I'm going to dimension here. All right, and this is going to be my diameter parameter. All right, so I'm going to select that guy. I go up to label. I say add parameter, and let's call this one diameter. Alright, so there's diameter. Let's go to our front elevation, and let's just test it out, just make sure I've got the right view here. So let's go to 18 inches for our diameter. Okay. Yep. Here, let's go back to 2 feet. Good. Okay, yeah. So both of those guys are spreading. Okay. Alright, good. So our center point, this is where our axis line is going to go. And then we're going to build our profile over here on this side here. Alright, we're going to add in those parameters. And what's happening is, in our floor plan here, you can see you've got these EQ dimensions here. So that's basically keeping the keeping this reference plane in the center, right? And then these outer walls here are the ones that are expanding and contracting. Okay, so let's go back to our front elevation. Alright, so pretty much most of the time we're going to be working in that front elevation. Alright, the first two parameters that I want to create are the capital and the base. So those are across the top and bottom. So I'm going to just create a reference plane across the top and one across the bottom. One for our capital and one for our base. So I go to create, reference plane. I'm going to draw a horizontal one across here. And another one down here. Alright. And again, I'm not going to create any geometry until I'm finished with these creating all these parameters. So I'm going to add a dimension there and a dimension there. Okay, and let's turn this one into a base parameter. So I select the dimension, go up to label, add parameter, and we're going to call this one base. Oops, capital B, I guess, base. All right, and then let's change this one to top. I'm sorry, capital. Sorry, oops. All right, so I select the dimension, go to label, add parameter, and let's call this one capital. Okay, there's capital. Alright, and then let's go to 4 blue squares. Alright, so there they are. So let's see, the capital was 8 inches, and the base was 6. Oops, 8 inches. Alright, so let's set those back. Alright, good, so I got capital and base. Now the other thing we have on here are we have a series of joints that are on there. Let me go back to the... Alright, so we've got one here right underneath the capital, one above the base, and then there's 2 in the middle here. So what I want to do is I want, whenever that capital and that base changes height, I want these guys to respace equally in there. So what I want to do is I want to actually create a reference plane, but I want the reference plane to go right into the middle of the joint. So at the middle of each of these joints here. Alright, and so if our joints are 1.5 inches, then we want them to be at, so the joint will be 3/4 above and below those reference points. So alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, 4 reference planes in the approximate locations of the reference planes where they're going to go. So let's go to create, reference plane. So there's one joint just below the capital. There's one joint just above the base, and then there's 2 in the middle. Okay. Alright. And let's space them out evenly. Alright, so let's do an EQ dimension. Alright, so that'll put them in equally. Alright, so if this is the center point of that reference plane, actually let me delete this before, I think that may mess us up a little bit later. So let's actually hold off on that dimension, that EQ dimension. Now this one will be half, so this is going to go through the center of that joint that's in that column. So this should be 3/4 of an inch below this reference plane that's controlling the capital. Alright, so I select the reference plane, I'm going to edit this dimension, and I'm going to make that 3/4 of an inch. Alright, good. Let's do the same thing at the bottom. I'm going to pick this guy here, select this dimension, and let's go to make that 3/4. Alright. Alright, then then I want to create the underside of, actually what I want to do is now create the reference planes for each of those joints. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new reference plane just below that one. And this one is also going to be 3/4 of an inch away. Alright, so let's dimension those. So I'm going to go dimension that reference plane. There's my center line of that joint, and then the bottom side of that joint. And let's change my scale real quick here so that it's something a little bit smaller. That's maybe too small. There we go. It's a little bit more manageable. Okay, so here's the center point of my joint. Then I want these two reference planes to be 3/4 of an inch above and below it. Alright, so that one's 3/4 of an inch. That's good. Now let's pick this one. Let's edit that. So that's 3/4 of an inch. Alright, so there you go. So there's my joint. There's the top and bottom of the joint. Alright. Let's do the same thing at the bottom here. Let's create another reference plane. And the shortcut for reference plane is RP. If you just want to type in RP, that'll create a reference plane for you. Alright, let's dimension them. So here's the top of the base. There's the center point of the joint. There's the top of the joint. Okay, so let's change them both to 3/4 of an inch. Good. All right. Alright, so let's do the same thing with these two middle ones. Okay, I'm going to create a reference plane above and below. Oops. Alright, and they should each be 3/4 of an inch apart. 3/4 of an inch. Alright, so pick the reference plane, select the dimension, edit it to 3/4 of an inch. Okay.
You did not lock any.
No, so far I haven't locked anything. Alright, do that one more time here at this other joint. Okay. Alright, pick the reference plane. I'm going to edit that to 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to create a parameter for the joint width. So if you go back to our handout here, what we have is a parameter that controls the width of those joints, or I guess the height of that joint, and that is here. So we'll call that joint width. All right, so that's going to be our parameter. So I'm going to go back to our Revit file. Okay, so I'm going to create. This is going to be our joint width here. So let's do a dimension there. So I dimension from this is essentially the bottom of that capital to that reference plane here. Alright, so it's 1.5 inches. Okay, and we're going to call this one, let's see, what did it say in the handout? It called it joint width. So that's going to be our parameter. So I select that geometry, or that dimension, go to label, add parameter, and we're going to call it joint width. Alright, I say OK. Alright, so let's do that with each of those joints. Alright, so there, there, and there. Oops. There and there. Alright, so since I already created it, I'm just going to say joint width. Shoot. So this is, I don't know, this is kind of a weird anomaly with Revit. It sometimes creates these and makes some reporting parameters. So let me just go to 4 blue squares and fix that real quick. See where it says here, where it grays it out and it calls it a reporting parameter. I don't know how this happens, but what you get to fix it, basically what you do is to select that parameter, modify, and then uncheck this little box here that calls it a reporting parameter. And I'm going to change it back to a type parameter. Alright, so if you ever get that situation where it calls it a reporting parameter, just go in, pick modify that parameter, and then more than likely this little box here that says reporting parameter is checked, and switch it back to a type parameter. I'll say OK. OK. Alright. Alright, so let's pick this guy, and let's make him a joint width. Okay, let's try that again. Oh, I'm sorry? Is it an instance parameter? Oh, okay, change it to a type parameter. Alright, so joint width. 1.5 inches. I think it's going to over-constrain my sketch here. Alright, let me try this real quick. There we go. Okay, so let me just kind of skip ahead a little bit. Okay, so joint width 1.5. That's going to control the width of our joint. Now we've got these. This line here represents the center of that joint, so that's the center point of that joint there. And we have it 3/4 and 3/4 of an inch. Now this parameter here, this joint width parameter, that's going to change, right? So we could change it to 2 inches, 3 inches, and 4 inches. So what I want to do is, instead of these being 3/4 of an inch apiece, what I want to actually do is actually make them equal. So they can be any number you want. They'll always be equal. So what that'll do is that'll allow us to change our joint width here, and allow us to maintain or keep this point, this reference line here in the middle. All right. So I say so. Let's change those to EQ. So I pick it, select EQ, then I change it to joint width. So I'm going to pick these two dimensions here, say EQ, so I make them equal, then add another dimension out here, and let's make this one joint width. All right, and then do the same thing down here, pick these guys, make them equal, then do a dimension, and make that joint width. Okay, so let's test that out. So what I've got here is all my little joints that are in there, my little reveals in the column, and I've got a parameter that's controlling their width. So let's do that. So I go to joint width. Let's change that to 3 inches. And say OK. And I change them all to 3 inches. Notice it still maintained my capital dimension here, so that's good. And my base dimension down here, that's good. All right, so they're 3 inches. All right, let's change it back to 1.5 inches. And say OK. Now we want to make sure that each of these joints stay equally spaced apart, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this reference plane here, and these are all the centers of those joints. So let's do a dimension to each of those center points of those joints, and let's make them all equal. All right, so I'm going to go dimension to the center points of the joints. All right, let's set them equal. All right. And let's go back to 4 blue squares. Let's test this thing out. All right, so what I did was I just dimensioned to the centers of those joints and then made them all equal. All right, I'm going to test it out in 4 blue squares. So our joint width adjusted a little bit, so let's just change that to 1.5 again. All right, and then apply. Good. All right, let's change our capital to 14 inches. Hit apply. Good. So then what happened was I changed my capital, made my capital much deeper, but what it did was it still maintained my 1.5 inches on my joint width and equally spaced them out. So that's good. So far so good. All right, let's go back to the capital and let's make that back. Let's put that back at 8 inches. All right, so that is that. Oh, then so these reference planes here are going to control our diameter. All right, but then we also have the capital width here, which is also adjusting. So let's go back to our handout here. Okay, so you'll see here that these reference planes here are controlling the diameter, but the capital, these little points out here for the capital, we want those to stretch as well. So what we're going to do is create new reference planes for the outside, for the diameter, I guess, of the capital and the base. And those, there isn't a parameter that controls them independently, so we're going to lock them. All right, so if you do the math here, so that's a radius of 9 inches. That's a radius of 11 inches. So there's a 2-inch gap between these reference planes. And this one is 27 inches, so that's 13.5 inches for radius. So that's 2.5 inches between here and here for those reference planes. Hopefully I did the math right. All right, so let's do that. So let's put in 2 new reference planes, one for the capital, one for the base. And let me just kind of do a little housekeeping here. Let me just move these guys over. So just spread things out so you can see it a little easier. Alright, so let's draw two reference planes. There and there. Alright, so this one was 2 inches apart. So I'm going to dimension that down here. Okay, and then we're going to pick this dimension, we're going to make that 2 inches. So add that dimension to 2 inches. Alright, so now they're 2 inches apart, and this one you want to lock, because it's always going to be 2 inches apart from the reference plane for the diameter. Alright, so I pick that dimension, lock it. Alright, this one's going to be 2.5 inches between here and here. Alright, pick that reference plane, call that one 2.5. Alright, there's 2.5 inches, and then lock that one. Alright, so here's what's going to happen. I'm going to change my parameter for my diameter, and that's going to move that reference plane. Then, because I have these dimensions down here locked, then these dimensions, which control the base and the capital diameter, then those are going to move along with it. So we're always going to have a 2-inch and a 2.5-inch distance between those reference planes. Alright, so let's see here. Oh, and then one last thing. So then we've got our reference plane that control that. Then another thing that we're going to need to create is our joint depth. Alright, so if you go to up here, so far we've got joint width, diameter, capital, base. Going back to our handout. Alright, base, capital, diameter, joint width, there, okay. And so what we've got is then we need a joint depth. And that's basically the depth of these joints, that are in there. So I'm going to create another reference plane that's right here behind that diameter reference plane. That reference plane is going to control my joint depth. Alright, so let's go back to our Revit file. I'm going to hit cancel. So I'm going to draw another reference plane just to the left of that one. So RP. Alright, there's my reference plane. Oops, I didn't quite make it far enough. Alright, so I dimensioned that one. This one's going to have a parameter. Okay. So this one I'm going to turn into a parameter called joint depth. So I go to label, add parameter, and let's call this one joint depth. Alright, so there it is. Alright, and let's change that to 1 inch. Let's just go joint depth, change it to 1 inch. Okay. Alright, so let's test this thing out. Alright, apply. So joint depth, let's make that 2 inches. Good. Alright, that one works. Okay. Then, let's see. Okay, so let's go back to the handout. Alright, so then we've got a base, an offset at the base level, and an offset at the top level. And let's kind of scroll down through here. So as far as I can tell, that base level, the offset at the base and at the top is basically an offset that we're going to set so that we can offset. So let's say we want that the base of that column. Let's say we don't want it on the floor. Let's say we want it offset 2 inches from the floor. Or the same thing with the top. Like if you've got a ceiling at 9 feet, but you want to offset it maybe 3 inches from the top there. So we're going to do that one. So that'll be our next thing here. So that'll be the last of the parameters that we'll set up. Okay, so what I want to do, so I have this one, the base set to, it's basically connecting to this reference level, the lower reference level. So in order to get an offset, I'm going to have to put in a new parameter, and I can't connect this base to the reference level because it's not always going to be on the reference level. So let's put in a new reference plane just above that reference level. All right, so there. And let's delete this dimension here. Alright, so I'm going to delete that. And now we're going to create our base there. So I'm going to dimension between there and there. And that's going to be my... Then I'm going to change this and I'm going to make this one my base. Alright, so that's going to be 6 inches. Alright. Alright. So let's grab that reference plane again. Let me tab through and pick it and pull it up. All right, so I'm gonna actually let's see what happens when I change my base level. So let's change our base to 4 inches. Let's see if it goes up or down. 4 inches. Okay, so it pulled up. So that's good. All right, so there. So what I want to do now is then create that offset parameter between here's the bottom of my base, or here's the bottom of my column, and here's the floor. So that'll allow us to give us an offset. So I'm going to put a dimension there and there. All right, 2 inches. Let's make that a parameter. All right, and that's going to be base level offset. Offset. All right, so that's base level offset. All right, so let's see what happens when I make that 6 inches. So if I make base back to 6 inches, see if it pushes up. It does. Okay, good. So my base pushes up, so I've got a 6-inch base. What that did is it pushed this reference plane up. It respaced all of my joints, and my joint width stayed at 1.5 inches. So that's good. So far, so good. All right, so let's change that base level offset though in 4 blue squares. Let's change it back to 0. All right, that's 0. All right, so it changes back to 0. So what it did is it just dropped the bottom of that column down, and the base stayed at 6 inches, and everything stayed the same. All right, so we're going to do basically those same steps at the top to create that top level offset. So I'm going to go to reference plane, across the top here, just below my upper reference level. All right, let's delete that guy. Let's put a new dimension in. So here's the bottom of my capital. Here's now the new top of my capital. Let's change it into a parameter, which is called capital, which we already have in here. So that's 8 inches. All right, let's readjust capital. Let's make capital now 6 inches. All right. Then I'm going to put in a new dimension here, and that's going to be my top offset. So I put in a dimension there to there. All right, 2 inches. Pick that reference plane, or pick that dimension, go up to label, add parameter, and we're going to call that top level offset. Okay. It goes up to there. All right, so let's change that back to. So let's change capital back to 8 inches. Hopefully that'll push everything down. Good. All right, so I pushed everything down. Let's change my top level offset back to 0. Okay, and hit apply. Now here's an important thing too to kind of point out. So I've got all my parameters all loaded into here, and I've created them all. If you go to here. Right. Here's the parameters when they created this handout. Here's the parameters. Notice they're in a different order. They're in a completely different order than what I have here. As far as I can tell, there's no way of changing the order of these parameters that you create that you have in your type select or in 4 blue squares. So it creates them, I think, in the order in which you created them. Although, look, top level offset was the last one we created, and it put it all the way up at the top. So I have no idea what the logic is behind that. So yeah. Yeah, however it comes in, that's how it is. So all right, so let me minimize that. Okay, so we've got basically all of our parameters created. Everything, we've tested it out. Everything's moving kind of how we want it. So the next thing to do is then to draw the geometry in. All right, so to draw that geometry, what we're going to do is go to create, and like I said before, it was a revolve. So I'm going to go to the revolve command. Alright, now we're in sketch mode. Let's draw that axis line in first. So I'm going to pick axis line. Alright, and the axis line is that center point. So let's go to there. So we're going to draw it right basically on that center point. Alright. And I'm just going endpoint to endpoint on that reference plane. And you can lock it there if you want. We'll just do that. We'll lock it. Alright, so there's my reference, my center line, or my point of axis. Alright, then we're going to just create the boundary line. The boundary line has to be a closed loop, and this is going to be just a series of pick lines and locking it. Alright, so you want to pick lines and lock it to pretty much everything in there. So let's do that. So I'm going to boundary line, pick lines, and we're just going to pick every one of those reference planes. Now here at the top, I'm going to have to tab a little bit to get that reference plane. I want to make sure I'm picking the reference plane Alright, so to get that reference plane, pick until you see that dashed line. Alright, see it there. So here you can tell I've got the level, the top of column level. Let me click one more time. Now I've got the reference plane. And then lock. Alright, and then that one is just going to be a straight line. It's going to be actually a diagonal line going from here to there, I believe. Oops, let me check on the let me check on the handout here. Yeah, okay, so from that line to that line. Okay, so it's a diagonal line, and it goes from here to here. Alright, now there you're doing endpoints, so it should snap automatically to those endpoints, or it should lock automatically from endpoint to endpoint. Alright, let's go back to pick lines. So pick that line there, lock it. Alright, then this is the inside of that joint. Alright, so I picked that line there. Alright, that reference line is the line that's basically controlling the joint depth. So I'm going to lock it to that. I'm going to pick that reference line. That's the bottom of the joint. So pick that one, lock it. Alright, and just to keep things clean, I'm going to trim a little bit here. Just so if you get too many lines, it just gets confusing, and so I'm just going to trim. Alright, then pick lines. This is the diameter of my column, so I'm going to pick that and lock it. Alright, and then here's the joint, so here's that other joint there, so pick lines, lock it, back of the joint. Alright, it says that these two lines overlap, that's fine. When I trim them, they won't, so. And then pick the bottom side of that joint, lock it. Alright, so let's do some housekeeping. Let's trim this thing up a little bit. Trim, 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 trim. Alright, and then trim up there. Okay. Alright, let's keep going. Pick lines. Alright, there's the diameter of that column. Again, I'm getting this error message that says lines are overlapping. Just ignore it for right now. We'll when we trim it, they won't overlap anymore. Alright, pick lines, lock. Pick lines. Lock it. Okay, trim. Oops, wrong one. Okay, let's do it again. Pick lines. Alright, and then trim. Alright, then pick lines one more time. Trim. Okay. Alright, and then the base of that, let's see, here's the line that controls the base. There. Okay, so I'm going to pick lines. There's the diameter of my base. Lock it. Alright, and then I want to do that bottom one, but I want to make sure that I'm not picking the level indicator. I want to pick the reference line, the one that's controlling my base. So I hit tab. There it is. Pick that one, lock. Alright, and then I can pick my reference plane. Alright, no need to lock in that one. Alright, so let's trim this thing up. So trim. Alright, so after, oops, one more up there. Okay, so there, after a long series of clicking and locking, I've got my profile created. Alright, so let's cross our fingers. Let's hope this thing closes. Alright, and hit finish. Yay! Alright, good. So it did. So now I've got a 3D geometry. Let's save it. I'll just do a save there. Alright, so here is our column and elevation. So let's test this thing out. Alright, so let's change our diameter first. So diameter, let's change it to 24 inches, or 2 feet. Hit apply. Good, so far so good. Alright, let's change that capital to 12 inches. Okay, apply. Alright, base, let's do 8 inches, apply. Good. Alright, let's do those offsets then. Well, actually, let's do the joints. Take this joint, let's make it 3 inches. Good. Alright, then our depth, let's change that to 2. Apply. Alright, so far so good. Alright, now let's try those offsets. Let's see if those work. Let's cross our fingers. At top level offset, let's go 3 inches. Good. So the top dropped down, it respaced all my joints. That's good. And then base level offset is, let's say, 4 inches. Alright, good. So far everything is working out pretty good. So to wrap this one up, I'm not going to go through it in the tutorial here, but add a material parameter to that column, and then create a type. And the type that we're going to create is called, there it is, 18 inch. So when you do that, we create a type that's 18 inches, and use these as your as the parameter values that you want to plug in there for that 18-inch diameter column. And then with that, your column is basically all set. So, all right.